Take it from Steve Lipsher of Summit Fire and EMS. Wildfire education is like a Coca-Cola commercial. The more you hear about safety and prevention, the more likely you are to remember it, even if you get sick of Smokey the Bear and reminders to douse your campfires every single summer. As wildfires rage in southern Colorado and into the Great Plains, we talked with Lipsher for advice on how to protect your home, your family, and your great outdoors from the threat of fire in Summit County. Phil Lindeman, Krystal 93 News Director, in the studio today with Steve Lipsher of Summit Fire and EMS. Steve, thanks for joining.
Hey, my pleasure.
Of course. And we are talking wildfire season, end of the ski season coming up, and we've been having some great snow, but we've been hearing a lot about the state of Colorado's snowpack right now. Now, tell me a little bit about snowpack and where it's at and what that means for wildfire season coming up.
It's always hard to predict what it's going to mean for wildfire season, but when there's snow on the ground and snow in the tree canopies, it obviously will shorten the wildfire season. Fires don't typically burn when there's snow on the ground. So the longer we can have the snow on the ground, the lower our risk of having a big wildfire. That said, there's always a caveat. We have had fires in the middle of March right next to patches of snow where our firefighters have literally used shovels and dumped snow on the flames.
That is wild. Well, and of course, and there was one recently in Edwards 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there was just a quick burning brush fire, and then we've been hearing about fires in southern Colorado and some other places like that where snowpack is especially thin right now. Southern Colorado's been having the worst of it.
Exactly, and again, that goes to the shorter fire season or the longer fire season. If there's low snow, we can expect a longer fire season. I pulled some stats today. Some of those southern basins, like the Rio Grande Basin and the river basin down in southwestern Colorado, are at 34 and 35% of their annual average, respectively. So that's
Yikes.
Really dry. 1/3 of the amount of snow that they normally would have on the ground right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't done any skiing down south this year, but from friends and other people I know, they were saying, ski conditions were brutal, which is, of course, meaning that the wildfire conditions down there could be pretty gnarly as well.
It's always a double-edged sword. When we have a lot of moisture, what we see is a lot of vegetation growth. Well, when that vegetation dries out, ultimately that becomes potential fuel for a wildfire. So we want a happy medium. We would love to see average or even above average snowpack for our ski conditions. And then we're always thinking in terms of, what's this going to do for vegetation growth?
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of that before because, like you said, lots and lots of snow and moisture will lead to great green stuff for as long as the moisture sticks around. And
as long as, the vegetation remains green. So, typically we'll see in late September and October, once we start getting the nighttime frost, those grasses and sedges will freeze up and turn into, crispy, crackling blades of grass.
Fuel.
Exactly.
All right. Now, looking ahead, the wildfire season coming up, when do you guys, I guess, expect it to really start? Because there's several seasons. There's usually, the first season that we talk about, and then second wildfire season. Right. When do you expect this first one to get started? And as we're looking ahead, how can people prepare now?
Well, you're asking a couple of really great questions, and I'll give you a couple of answers to those. One, wildfire season is potential up here any time of year. As you just mentioned, Edwards had a good wildfire just a week and a half ago. So, and we're not far behind them. We're only a little bit higher and a little bit snowier than they are. So we definitely could see wildfires even now. Typically, our fire season doesn't end until our mud season, or doesn't begin until our mud season ends. So, late May is when we'll start being more concerned about wildfire. But we're having our firefighters do their refreshers now so that they are ready to go. The other thing, what can you do? This is a great time for locals to start taking steps to be ready for fire season. So I talk a lot about, I hate to say it, but checking your insurance policy, your property insurance policy, and making sure that you're adequately covered.
True.
doing things like backing up all your vital documents and irreplaceable family photographs so that if you ever were to lose your home to a fire, you could still at least get a reasonable facsimile of the historic photo of your Grandpa Joe on the family farm in the 1920s.
Yeah, not a total loss.
Exactly. Preparing your evacuation kit would be another thing. We do strongly encourage people during the summer wildfire months to have a kit in their car with everything they would need if they had to bug out right away on short notice. And could they survive comfortably for 2 or 3 days until they got replenishments? So daily medications, pet food for your pets, anything that you would want to take on a little 3-day jaunt away from home.
Yeah, so getting prepared now, some of those things that you can do to be looking ahead. Now, when somebody is, maybe looking at their home, is now a good time to be preparing your home itself for wildfire season?
Absolutely. It's a little bit hard if you still have snow in your yard like I do.
If you're living in Blue River and you're still under
right.
2 feet of snow, yeah.
But, we do talk about creating adequate defensible space. And by that, what we're talking about is space between your home and tall trees and, in particular, the wild forest, so that if there is a wildfire threatening your home, that our firefighters would have a chance of defending your home, of protecting it. And if you've got trees growing right up against the home, if you've got heavy ground vegetation growing right up against your home, our firefighters might look at that, and if it's too risky for their own safety, they won't defend your home. So we are encouraging people even now to start thinking about what does your landscaping look like around your home, and how thick is that vegetation, and how heavy are your trees around your home.
Okay, great. You were mentioning earlier that firefighters are getting their refreshers, training up for wildfire season. What kind of training goes into wildfire specific, training?
Lots of things, and I think our firefighters generally really appreciate it, because this is the type of actual hazard that we're real likely to face. So they'll review all of their skills. They'll go through their wildland engines and make sure that all of the equipment is restocked and functioning correctly. They've sharpened the teeth on their chainsaws. They have extra fuel. They have their fire shelters. They will practice with their fire shelters, which are what they use in case they're trapped by a wildfire and it's a last resort chance to try to save their own lives. So you have to practice with those things, because if you need it, you really need it.
Yeah, it's like any other skill, CPR or any of those other ones. You want to be able to muscle memory your way through it if you have to have it. You can't just be fumbling around and wondering, how do I set this thing up as that fire's bearing down?
That's exactly right. And then every year we'll focus on different aspects. Last year, for instance, we talked about using sprinklers to protect homes. Very simple idea, but one that has a lot of great merit. In fact, it's one that even individual homeowners could think about. And we have seen property owners who have plumbed their homes to put sprinklers on their roofs. And in last year's practice, we actually set up these big, what looked like giant lawn sprinklers on tripods around a property to ostensibly protect it from a wildfire.
And did it work pretty well?
Well, we didn't actually have a fire.
I thought you guys were just testing it to see if it happened.
Yeah, we were, but in practice, you would think that it would work just fine. It makes perfect sense. If you wet down the vegetation to the point where it won't burn and the flames can't encroach your home, it's a great sort of not passive way, but a non-confrontational way of facing the flames. You can set up these sprinklers and then leave, and then let the fire, do what it's going to do while you're safe.
Yeah, very creative use of some of those tactics. Great. Looking ahead again to wildfire season, what else should people be aware of, should know, no matter what the conditions are? I mean, I know that we've been talking that this season could be pretty nasty. But what should people just know in general? Keep in mind.
We always beat the drum of awareness and having people recognize that wildfires are a part of our landscape and one of our objective hazards. No different than if you lived in Kansas and you had the threat of tornadoes, or if you lived in Miami and you had the threat of hurricanes. We live in the high Rockies where wildfires are part of the landscape, and so everyone should be aware of that possibility and prepared for the possibility that this could be the year. Among the things that we're doing to raise awareness, and you reported on this, Phil, was that the state legislature passed and Governor Hickenlooper signed into law a new measure that would increase the penalties for abandoning a campfire.
Yes, yeah, and that was just passed not too long ago.
Right, and we don't know that this is going to drastically change behavior. We're using it more as an opportunity to once again educate people on what is the proper way to have a campfire. Burn it under conditions that are appropriate for having a campfire, for instance, not under high fire danger. Never leaving it, always having a way of extinguishing it, and extinguishing it properly and thoroughly so that you're not leaving anything unintentionally smoldering, and which could then blow up into a wildfire.
Yeah, good way to open the conversation up again about proper, just stewardship out in the forest and when you're out and around, because folks who live here in the mountains, they tend to know what to do with a fire. Folks who are coming from out of the mountains, maybe they don't. So it's one of those things just to keep in mind that not everybody knows their way around a fire in the woods.
And I always joke that I have a certain amount of job security because promoting these messages is a never-ending task. I liken it to how Coca-Cola continues to advertise massively. Well, everyone knows what that product is, but they do it to keep it foremost in people's minds. Well, with wildfires up here in Colorado, I am trying to keep it foremost in people's minds, whether they're locals or visitors alike. We all need to take control over the possibility of a wildfire.
Great. Steve, I think that was all I had for you.
Well, thanks for having me and helping us get out the word.
Of course. Well, thanks for coming in to join us. And of course, everybody out there, wildfire season is around the corner. Be safe, be smart, and make sure that you are being responsible with your fires in the forest. Steve, thanks for joining.
You're welcome.
Phil Lindeman on Krystal 93.